guys, welcome to our first flipped classroom. We do these so that we can do some more engaging activities during class time and you guys can take care of the lecture part at home. So what you're going to need right now is some paper, something to write with, and your 3 highlighter colors, including a yellow one. So if you don't have those things, then push pause and go get what you need and come on back. All right, what you should be writing down on your notes at the very top is your name and period. Don't forget your last name, please. But additionally, the title of today's PowerPoint, we're doing part 1 of today's PowerPoint, 3.1, 3.2, the Arabian Peninsula, Islam, and Muhammad. Directly beneath that, you're going to go ahead and write down both EQs. Now, because we're doing this at home and I can't see how long you guys are taking to write things down, everybody writes at a different pace. So I'm going to let you know when I plan on moving on to another slide. And if you're not ready yet, then just go ahead and push pause and finish up writing whatever you need from that slide, and then you can move on at that point. Okay? So at the moment, I am about to move on. So if you're not ready and you are still writing down your EQs, then push pause until you're ready to go, and then join me for our first slide. All right. Okay, so you finished writing down your EQs. You should be drawing a line all the way across everything you just wrote so that we can get started with question 1. All right, the question you see on the slide right now is the question you will be using for the left-hand side of your notes. We've still been teaching you guys the process of left-hand side questions, okay? So we're still helping you out and giving them to you, so go ahead and write that one down. Remember, a left-hand side question shouldn't just be something you can answer with a yes or a no. It shouldn't be something that you can answer with a short phrase or a couple of words. It really needs to be something that takes at least one detailed sentence to really give somebody a good answer, if not more, okay? So our first one for the left-hand side is, what are the physical features and climate of the Arabian Peninsula? And you can take a look at the pictures underneath the question and you can see the Arabian Peninsula is almost all desert. All right, if you're not ready, go ahead and push pause because I'm moving on. All right, you're now on the right-hand side of your notes, and on the right-hand side, you're writing down the title of this slide, Q1A, location of the Arabian Peninsula, and you are highlighting it yellow. All right, once you have that ready, then go ahead and start taking the notes. So where exactly is the Arabian Peninsula anyway? Well, the Arabian Peninsula is actually a part of the continent of Asia. However, it's right on the edge. So you've got Africa to the left, and you've got the rest of Asia over to the right. And then, of course, above it, you have Europe. This is going to end up making the Arabian Peninsula a really popular trade center because you've got 3 continents that can all kind of meet in the middle here in the Arabian Peninsula. You've got the Red Sea over here on the left, and you've got the Persian Gulf over here on the right. And then down below, you've got the Arabian Sea. So again, a lot of trade and also a lot of desert. In fact, one desert towards the southern end of the Arabian Peninsula is called the Empty Quarter. It is so big. It's over 250,000 miles, square miles, big desert. The Arabian Peninsula at its longest point is about 1,200 miles long, and at its widest point is about 1,300 miles wide. All right, if you're not ready, push pause now because I'm moving on. All right, you've got kind of a conundrum in front of you. You haven't had this happen to you yet, I don't think anyway. You've got a new title, but we haven't had a new question. Well, that's because our question that we've already written down for the left will still work for this, but we do have a new title. You're going to write that down, Q1B, the Arabian Peninsula climate, and go ahead and highlight that yellow. Notice on this slide you have your first couple words that are double underlined. Remember, double underlined words need to show up in your summary somewhere if you want credit for them. They're worth half a point apiece, and you're supposed to highlight them in your summary when you write your summary. So you've got desert and oases on this slide. Make sure you use your vocab colored highlighter to highlight those as you're taking your notes. All right, so as I was saying, the Arabian Peninsula is mostly desert. You can get some successful farming at larger oases locations, and you can also get some farming in the south. There's some mountains and there's a northern coastline that can support farming. But most of the Arabian Peninsula is desert. And so, especially during the medieval period, but even today, a lot of people that live in the peninsula are nomadic, which means they move from place to place. They're not sedentary. They don't settle in one place and stay. They can't get enough food to survive in one place in most of the locations of the peninsula. So they move around. That means that the trading centers are only going to develop in certain areas. So the oases, especially the larger ones, kind of become the trading center markets. And in fact, two of those are both Mecca and Medina, which we'll be talking about during the course of this unit. All right, I am moving on. So if you're not ready, push pause and join me when you're finished. All right, we're all done with question 1. So you want to draw a line across everything you just wrote and move on to Q2. So on the left-hand side of your notes, you are writing down, what was life like on the Arabian Peninsula? As I was telling you, it was very nomadic. A lot of people used camels, as you can see from the pictures depicted below. If you're not ready to move on to the next slide, then push pause because I'm moving on. All right, so now you're on the right-hand side of your notes, and on the right-hand side of your notes, you guys are writing down Q2, life on the Arabian Peninsula, and you're highlighting it yellow. Again, I want to point out there are 3 double underlined words on this slide, so make sure that you're using your vocab highlighter color to highlight those as you're taking your notes. So I was telling you it's very nomadic. Well, most of these nomadic groups moving around from place to place were called Bedouins. The Bedouins were family clans that moved around from oases to oases looking for supplies and water. The clans tended to be made up of large family groups. So you have aunts and uncles and grandmas and grandpas and cousins and second cousins and all those kind of people traveling with you. Because they traveled in a big group like that, they were called caravans. Okay, they caravanned from place to place. And there was a couple good reasons to use caravans. One, you wanted the company. You're out in the middle of nowhere and people are social creatures. But 2, you also wanted it for security. It was very common for one nomadic Bedouin clan to raid another Bedouin clan for all kinds of things. Water, very precious resource out there in the desert, so to try to steal water from each other. Animals and livestock, especially your camels, as well as different types of goods, food, and even women. Sometimes they would raid other clans to try to get a hold of the other clan's population of ladies. So a lot of different reasons why you wanted to travel in large numbers so that you could have protection. All right, if you're not ready, make sure you push pause because I'm moving on. All right, we're on our new question, which means you're drawing a line across everything you just wrote, all right? And then you're writing down Q3, who was Muhammad, on the left-hand side. You don't have to write down Q3. You just write down who was Muhammad. But all right, so get that on the left. If you're not ready, push pause because here I go. All right, so you're on the right-hand side of your notes, and you should be writing down Q3, Muhammad, and highlighting it yellow. Now notice, this is the first slide that has bolded red writing. And in this PowerPoint, the bolded red writing is our super duper most important, most likely, hint, hint, wink, wink, gonna be on a test. So you wanna make sure that you use your super duper important information highlighter color and highlight that red information as you're writing stuff down. So Muhammad was born in the Arabian Peninsula around 570 CE. So that's well over 500 years after Jesus had been on the scene that we learned about, right, when we were talking about the Roman Empire. So this is quite a bit later. He was born into a wealthy family. However, he ended up being orphaned at quite a young age and ended up going into the caravan trade, trading for a living. When he's 25, he marries and he ends up becoming a pretty prosperous merchant. Well, when he's 40 years old, he goes up to a cave in Mecca one day and he's praying. And Muhammad claims that while he was praying in the cave that day, the angel Gabriel came down to him and gave him revelations. Revelations are like visions, okay? And the angel Gabriel told him that he was the messenger of God, as well as giving him information about how people should live and information about who God was and what he actually wanted. He said that God's name was Allah. And so Muhammad leaves the cave and he feels strongly that the angel Gabriel has wanted him to spread this new news, this revelation that he gave to Muhammad. So he's going to go down to the city of Mecca and start trying to spread the word that there is only one God and that God is Allah. This was going to be a big change of events for a lot of people living in Mecca because most Bedouin tribes and most people living in the Arabian Peninsula at that time were polytheistic. Remember, polytheistic means they believed in multiple gods. And here comes Muhammad saying, no, you're wrong. There is one God and his name is Allah. Some people embraced Muhammad's teachings and other people started persecuting Muhammad, treating him poorly, and even threatening him and trying to ensue violence against him and stuff for trying to spread this new message. Over time, Muhammad will ultimately end up becoming a religious, military, and political leader. That's a really important point you want to understand. He's a religious leader because he spreads Islam. He is a military leader because he will ultimately end up with an Islamic army that helps him to conquer all of the Arabian Peninsula, spreading Islam. And he's a political leader because everyone promoted him as the leader of the Arabian Peninsula, and he used a lot of treaties and other methods that are more political in nature than always just fighting with the military to try to spread Islam and take control of the Arabian Peninsula. So he's going to end up playing a lot of important roles throughout his lifetime. Okay, I'm done with the slide, so if you're not ready, make sure that you push pause because I'm moving on. All right, draw a line underneath everything you just wrote and go ahead and put the question number 4 over on the left-hand side. What is a Muslim? I'm moving on, so if you need more time, push pause. All right, on the right-hand side of your notes, you're going to put Q4, Muslims, and you're going to highlight it yellow. Well, this is a pretty easy one. Muslims are people who follow the religion of Islam, which we're going to get into more detail about as the presentation continues. Notice you've got a double underlined word on this one, so make sure you use your vocab highlighter color and underline Muslims. All right, I'm moving on, so if you need some extra time, push pause now. All right, why do Muhammad and his followers migrate to Yabrith? That's your question for the left-hand side. Don't forget to draw a line all the way across from everything you just wrote from number 4 before you move on to number 5 here. All right, I'm moving on, so push pause if you need more time to write down the question. All right, so Muhammad ends up ultimately leaving Mecca because him and the people who did choose to follow Islam with him were being persecuted pretty severely in Mecca. They were treated really poorly. And so they ultimately decide that they need to flee the city for their safety. And so they go over 200 miles north to another oasis city, which ultimately will end up being called Medina. The time that they travel there, it's called Yabrith. But while they're there, they change the name to Medina, and Medina means city of the prophet because the people of Islam believed that Muhammad was a prophet. And so they gather there and they actually stay there for quite a long time. That migration trip of that 200-mile journey moving up north is called the Hijra. Okay. Notice you've got some red information on this one, so make sure you use that highlighter color. Okay. Over his time in Yabrith, which will end up being called Medina, he gets quite a few more followers and he strengthens his Islamic army as well as his following on Islam. We're going to go ahead and pause there and pick up the notes in part 2. All right. I'll see you guys soon.